The topic of power in marriages is such a big and important one that as we were editing our recording of episode 9, we chose to split it into two more digestible parts. In part 1 we aired last week, we discussed the differences between feminine and masculine power and how they work together. Hopefully you were able to identify some aspects of power within your own relationship. We also shared research by Dr. Carmen Knudsen-Martin, providing questions to ponder in examining the power dynamics in your relationship. We discussed 2 of her 4 recommendations for developing balanced power in relationships, specifically mutual influence and shared relational responsibility. If you haven't heard that episode yet, we encourage you to listen to it before listening to this one. In this episode, part 2 of our discussion on power, we continue talking about 2 more elements of Dr. Knudsen-Martin's research, mutual attunement and shared vulnerability. We also talk about more research and our own experiences with exploring power in our marriage. We really hope this will help you have the discussions necessary to create a synergistic relationship and explore balanced and shared power within your marriage. So join us as we dive right in.
Welcome to Marriage IQ, the podcast for the intelligent spouse.
I'm Dr. Heidi Hastings.
And I'm Dr. Scott Hastings.
We are 2 doctors, 2 researchers, 2 spouses, 2 lovers, and 2 incredibly different human beings coming together for one purpose, to transform the stinky parts of your marriage into scintillating ones, using intelligence mixed with a little fun.
And we talked in a previous episode about how when a woman sees her husband doing household chores, it's like a natural aphrodisiac.
Right.
So
is that the one on intimacy?
That's one of them, but it does help fuel that a little bit, and so that's a nice bonus.
Another area that we can be more balanced with power is to have mutual attunement. Intentionally help your partner feel felt. Interestingly, oxytocin that we talked about in episode 7 is released when we intentionally and empathetically connect with each other. However, research is showing that when there's a power imbalance, the more powerful partner is less likely to be willing to give up their interests, to connect with or attune to their lower power partner.
So maybe it sounds like we need to just start injecting oxytocin into men, right? That'll fix the problem right there.
Someday. How interested is each partner in knowing and understanding the other's experience and perspective? Who listens to the other? And to what extent does each partner notice each other's feelings and needs? This could look like both partners being unhappy in the marriage and they try to bring it up to each other, but nothing ever changes, right?
It just stays the same.
Same song, different verse over and over. Conversely, Dr. John Gottman says that those who are masters of relationships, the couples who are masters of relationships, are more likely to approach their problems as a team and work on it together. But really, this starts with identity in a lot of ways. It starts with knowing yourself.
Sounds like a cornerstone to me.
It does. Knowing what your own needs are and then being able to verbalize those in peaceful ways, but also be curious and open to knowing what your partner's needs are.
That sounds really interesting.
Lastly is shared vulnerability. And for this one, the person in the relationship who holds the most power has to be the one to take the lead in moving toward a more vulnerable position, especially if you have a partner with any kind of a history of abuse or other kinds of traumatic things that have happened in their life. The partner who holds more power must be willing and able to create a safe place for experiencing vulnerability.
That might be hard to do.
It is, but we are asking people to do a lot of hard things. But tell me why you say that.
Well, I think it's hard for men to be vulnerable.
Yes, it is.
And I don't quite frankly know how to fix that other than to share with men that it begins with you, sir. It begins with you. It really begins with everyone. But
We each can.
I think if I had a megaphone to talk to men, we need to talk about vulnerability, because I think the problem with vulnerability for men is that when you say the word vulnerable, what does that conjure up in your mind? In my mind, as a man, that I'm weak,
Right.
that
More
I'm
than
weak, that
anything, they
I'm
want to be
powerless,
strong.
that I'm letting these things in that are taking over, and that's not vulnerable. But we have to start addressing the other side of what this word means, vulnerability. And there's power behind vulnerability.
There is great power.
We talked about this in the intimacy episode. There's intentional vulnerability and unintentional vulnerability. And if men can start learning about intentional vulnerability, that means you're intentionally thinking about addressing something that is sensitive to you with your spouse, with your wife, and being open.
Right. For example, how willing are you to admit your weaknesses or talk about your feelings of uncertainty about a specific topic, or talk to them about mistakes that you've made?
Right. That's hard. But we have to start relearning as men. We have to learn a new language. And one of these words is vulnerability. And it's not what we think it is.
And I might add to that if as women we can't help our husbands feel safe in vulnerability, then this type of power imbalance is probably not likely to occur. If they take a shot at it, they try to be vulnerable, and we are overreactive emotionally or emotional cutoff, or feel very defensive or attacked, or we're scared because they are exposing vulnerabilities, that's going to make it really tough.
Yeah, so the women are not off the hook here, right?
Right.
If they want their husbands to be vulnerable, they need to be ready to receive it. And that's why it's so important to be, again, intentional about your vulnerability. That means you have a space set aside for the husband, for the wife.
And that space is going to be filled with some discomfort. So being able to sit in discomfort is going to be very important.
Right. The wife needs to be able to hear it without overreacting.
Right.
Because that will just shut down her husband.
A couple of other questions. How able are partners to seek relationship repair by expressing their feelings or concerns? Or is that not met well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is the partner defensive? If the partner's defensive, then they're probably going to just close up. Who is most likely to do this when it happens? And how often do you silence your opinion for self-protection or for fear that it won't be acknowledged?
Okay. Yeah, those are great questions.
Good measuring sticks to see maybe where you lie with power.
So we're talking about the four things that you found here: the mutual influence, shared relational responsibility, mutual attunement, shared vulnerability.
Right.
Which I think the last one's the most important in my view. So I want to tell you a little bit about us, a story about us. Now, Heidi was feeling, and you can jump in, Heidi, feeling ambivalent about what to do with her life after she decided to go to graduate school. After the kids left the house, she did her master's degree. That was kind of a stepping stone. Mm-hmm. It was hard. It was really hard. But I had no idea what a PhD was compared to master's.
It's because for 3 years, you got to do all the dishes, the housework, and the meal planning.
Well, I had no idea. Like, the PhD was so much harder. And then you got done.
And you were done with that.
Yeah.
You were ready to move on.
I was done with that. But you were ambivalent. And I was like, let's go. Let's roll,
right,
baby. You're done. You got your doctorate. Let's move. And you felt really pressured from me. And I felt just passionate and excited. The story I told myself was I was excited to get rolling.
And to pump me up, to
And
support
to
me in
yes,
moving forward as fast as we could.
and for you, it was just
I was having an identity crisis because for 5 years I'd done almost nothing. I'd cut myself off from most of my friends and a lot of my social support. And I was here sitting at my desk doing work 16 hours a day, a lot of days. And so all of a sudden I had this freedom, but I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with it. And it was a morning of what felt secure and comfortable.
yeah, of a previous life.
Yeah.
But you also started discovering, though, some newfound power that you hadn't before, right? And it
Right.
was a little confusing to you, if I remember right.
It still is sometimes. Yeah.
Because as it goes, you are the executive producer of this podcast and everything we do on Marriage IQ.
As of probably starting episode 6, for a while, I kept giving the power to you to make the decisions because for 20 years I've supported you in your business and helped you make decisions, yes, but you ultimately had the last word on things. And it was such a hard transition for me to realize that I need to start making those decisions by myself. Well, with your counsel for sure, but that
But
I
you
can
hold
have
the
the
ultimate
final say.
authority over how this goes.
Right. It's a process, and it's really a little bit messy sometimes, trying to figure out that balance of power and to take, as a woman, more of my own agency and use it, more of my own power and use it. And also important to do that in peaceful ways, which sometimes it's been really confusing for me because I'm like, there's a power imbalance here. You're doing this and I'm feeling this. And I didn't do it necessarily in ways that were peaceful or loving and kind.
What? You're always loving and kind. What are you talking about?
Sometimes I mess up and I feel like I was doing a lot of apologizing, especially early on when I was trying to figure out who am I.
But it's been really awesome for me to see that almost like a metamorphosis, a little butterfly
That's cool.
coming
like
out.
that.
Yeah, I like it. But it wasn't it wouldn't happen if you hadn't exercised your agency.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to tell these other wives and men too, to exercise what they already have, the power that they already have.
And that's really what human development is in each stage of especially adult development, we learn how to use our agency better to make decisions for ourselves based on the information that we have, to use that power to bless other people's lives, not to rule over people, which really, I wanted to share some studies that I've looked at over the last few days. There are several researchers, but a couple of them are Gloria Felt, Brene Brown, and Mona Fishbane, among many others, who have developed a model on power that really applies to both an individual level and a relationship level.
Okay.
And it has 3 parts to it.
Tell me.
The first is power over someone or some people. And that is a relationship where domination exists. Or there can be, not all of these necessarily, but where there can be force, where you can deny other people what they want, where you control things, where you coerce people to get your way, where you manipulate, you may suppress, oppress, blame them, or humiliate them. And so by doing any of those, we're taking power over them, exerting power over them. That, in contrast to power with, power over, as opposed to power with. Power with is I'm sharing my power with you. We have shared decision making. We have shared distribution of responsibility. We're collaborative with each other. We're inclusive. I want to bring you into my business. We lead instead of forcing or pushing. We do it with empathy and with respect. And when we make mistakes, which we often will, we are very intentional about repairing.
Okay.
Then the third part of this model that I believe feeds out of power with is power to. So power
Okay.
over, power with, power
Power
to.
to.
And I love to see this as the power to do good. So I had a philosophy class in my doctoral program where we discussed some of the biggest philosophers' ideas about power, and it was always from the power over perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But power with really opens up the power to do good,
Oh,
to make our lives better for ourselves,
yeah.
for my marriage, for our family, for my community, and with the world. And we're sharing power in all of those different circles.
Wow.
This is where we really have become self-differentiated, meaning we can be autonomous and intimate, both in the same relationships.
It seems like an oxymoron, doesn't it?
It does, but that's where the research, lots and lots and lots of research
The greatest
shows.
power that you have is when you give it up.
Yep.
Right? Kind of going back to
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I
Yes.
get what you were saying
You
now.
thought that was ridiculous, but look, that's an awesome example of giving up power to take, well, not to take, no,
to share it, to receive it.
to have even higher power, to
Right.
more power.
But not from a selfish standpoint.
No,
but
totally.
to-
Totally selfless. I want to go watch Star Wars tonight just because of this here. So this kind of reminds me a little bit. You're talking about this. I'm thinking about a couple of books I've read that go along with this that are really good. They're by the Arbinger Institute.
Oh, I love them. Yes.
So the Anatomy of Peace. And I keep
Yeah.
thinking about the example of the Ottoman Turks when they took over Jerusalem back in the, I don't know, when it was like 1400s, I
That's
think.
what I was thinking.
And instead of using power over, force, dominate, control, they had shared power. They took
gave up
over.
some of their power.
They
right?
took over this area, and it was really strange. They allowed their captives access to power, and they were okay with it. It's the same thing with,
It was very peaceful.
yeah, it was a peaceful time. And the same thing with this other example of a man and a woman actually going through divorce and working together. They called it inside the box and outside the box. If we're thinking in the box, we're caught up in our own emotions, our own thoughts, our own stories that we tell ourselves. If we're outside the box, we allow others their story and their
Right.
perspective. That's power sharing. And I want to live outside the box. That's the other book is Leadership and Self-Deception.
So once we can self-differentiate, because we have shared power and power to do good, we can regulate our emotions better. We can self-soothe. We can respectfully disagree and be a peacemaker. We're not only able to have that power to do good when we have shared power, we have personal power also that can allow us to do that.
So we're talking about power, and I want to bring up a little bit about it's this age-old thing that men have done over the ages. And it's quite controversial these days. I don't know why. And that is opening the door for your sweetheart.
Right.
So there are mixed reviews on this, but I feel very passionate about this. Opening a door for you is highly important for me.
And I love it.
So here's why. I do not open the door for you to let you out of the car or let you into the building because poor pitiful you're so weak you cannot open the door.
Right.
That is not it. That's incorrect. That's not the story that anyone should be telling themselves. The story that I tell myself and that I want to share with you is I respect the feminine power that you represent.
I love that.
And I want to do everything I can to respect that. So I want to give you a little red carpet experience. Okay? Tell me one woman who does not like feeling pampered, even if it's just a small gesture.
Right.
You open the door. Now, I'm not talking about a random woman. I'm talking about your honey,
Right.
your spouse.
Right.
The feeling is special. You open the door for them wherever they go. You stand up when they come in the room, or you wait to eat until after they've started eating. It's kind of like a little Cinderella experience, right? And I don't know of any woman who does not like that and who would not like that, given all of those circumstances. We're not taking power from you. I'm respecting the feminine power that you represent. This is not a stodgy, outdated, old notion. I think you said there are more important things to talk about. And I said, okay. But I mean, you're the executive producer, so I guess you can cut this out if you want. But
it is important to talk about. You're right, because it does show respect for women.
Well, and the other thing, too, is I can open your doors for you and then treat you horribly behind those doors. And that is not what I'm talking about either. It is when I open a door for you, this is a very, very important symbolic gesture of honoring feminine power within you that you represent and that you hold.
I love that. And I know you also walk on the outside of the sidewalk when we're walking down streets.
Yeah, these seem to be like old things that nobody does anymore, but I think it's symbolic.
It is.
And it's really meaningful, especially if you back it up behind those doors and you treat...
Yes. That, I think, is the most important, because you can't open a door for your sweetheart and then not treat her
right.
well.
Yes.
Inside.
And that is that's not good.
Right.
Not good.
That's right. Well, some solutions that we want to talk about are twofold, and I'm going to talk about the first, and Scott will talk about the second. You know, Scott, I've just really noticed that sometimes I can do the very same thing. In one situation, I feel powerless, and in the other situation, I feel empowered. And it's
the same thing?
It's not about the thing that needs to be done, but it's whether I have choice in it or not.
Okay.
So, for example, I stayed home with our children the years before they started school.
Mm-hmm.
I could have stayed home with my children and resented that I didn't get to complete my career. I was headed for graduate school at that point, 22 years earlier than I actually went. I had a position in university administration that was virtually promised to me that I gave up, and I could have resented those things. But instead of choosing to have that career, I chose to stay home. That could have been something that later created a lot of frustration in me, a lot of anger in me if you had said, you are staying home with our children and you don't have a choice. Or if society had said that was how it had to be. I could have gotten really burned out and felt like I was really missing out on what I wanted. But because I got to make that choice and you supported me in it, even though it was super, super, super hard, and at times I felt like I was incapable of that. That was a lot harder than the other path. But because I chose that, I was comfortable with that, and at times it energized me when I felt like giving up. So that's on a big scale, but there are other smaller things that we do. Silencing ourselves, and especially as women, about what our desires are, what our thoughts are, how we feel about things, does not help us tap into our power. It does not help us tap into our agency. And so we can intentionally take that power, use our voices in peaceful, calm ways, not by putting the other person down or by exerting dominance, but in a shared power kind of circumstance. That's what truly gives us power.
So it sounds like you're trying to learn a new language. Really?
Yes. And it starts with the individual. Both, for me, it starts as a woman. For you, it starts as a man. But women, we really need to work on reclaiming our voice because we tend to self-silence a lot. We need to internalize our personal authority and create boundaries that we enforce. Equality in partnerships starts with individuals. The reality is, you and I, we have to start as individuals. Me, myself, and I. Just like
Yeah.
we talked about with our 4 cornerstones, all start with the letter I to remind us that it starts with me.
Yeah, I think the moment that we start thinking, oh, this is so great for my spouse,
Right,
for someone else, you're not getting it.
right.
It starts with me, with
And
I.
my individual efforts can ripple out to impact you, to
Yes.
impact our children.
And we're seeing that actually in some people.
Right.
It's
So satisfying.
so satisfying.
Right. On the other hand, individuals who blame their spouses or others for their circumstances, even though what they're blaming them for may be reality, it does prohibit their progression, which impacts their identity.
So if they continue to blame their spouse for the problems, they will not fix the marriage.
Instead of picking up their own agency and saying, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to move forward with this? What is it that I want?
But what if it's really, really convenient to just blame my spouse? Just, it's your fault. I'm comfortable with that. I'm not going anywhere. What I'm hearing you saying is you can't do that anymore. You can't blame your spouse. You got to start with you. And not only do you have to start with you have to start finding your voice, learning a language, learning things that you haven't done. Because if you want to make this marriage work, you need to start doing things that you have not done before.
And the kick to that is you got to do that whether or not your spouse changes because of it.
It's despite your spouse.
Despite your spouse.
Nothing that they do. It's going to be what you do and what you decide to do, right?
Because it will heal your wounds within yourself. It will help you have better well-being and be happier.
So I think that's kind of the purpose of getting around to this is it starts with me, myself, and I.
Right.
If I'm going to have a scintillating marriage, I need to learn what it means to have power. I need to discover power. If I feel powerless, I need to discover it. I don't need to talk about how you're taking it from me. I need to discover my own.
Okay, then let's also talk about the solution when both partners are willing to come at it and work with it.
Yeah, so we kind of have a saying here that true power can never be taken. It can only be discovered and only be given out of free will. It can never be taken. Once power is taken, that is not true power. So get together this week. We've talked about intentionality being one of the 4 cornerstones. We need you to get together, intentionally plan, put it on your calendar, schedule it, to be together, to talk together, to talk about...
If this is safe.
To talk about if the things that are creating these power imbalances or your perception of them. The story that I'm telling myself is this. Is this true or not?
That's a perfect recipe for how to say that.
Yeah.
That is using an I statement.
Yeah, so...
I feel...
Right, instead of...
You do this.
You're
do
doing...
that.
Yeah, so that's just not gonna go anywhere. We have to say, this is a story I'm telling myself. Is this true or not? And bounce it back to them. Okay. This is a story they're telling themselves. Okay, let's talk about it. Every time we do that, we kind of chuckle a little bit like, whoa, that is not the story I'm telling.
The stories we tell ourselves are rarely right.
So get together. We like to call these things couples councils, but the whole idea is to have a neutral, non-judgmental communication and mutual respect.
Right.
Those are the great power equalizers. There must be a healthy, continuous exchange of power. And the best way to do that is by counseling together. We invite you to examine where you might be exerting power over. Then come together with your partner, explore, embrace, where each of you can make changes to create shared power.
Power with.
power with. Lastly, discuss how shared and balanced power can allow you to have power to do things together that you never could have done before.
Power too.
Power too.
Yep.
Next week, we will be talking about couples counsel in detail so you can get an idea of what this looks like, kind of a template for your marriage. We're really excited to share that with you.
Right, and we have a couple of different templates that they may want to use.
Yeah.
Or create their own.
And you can go totally create your own too. We're trying to get this ball rolling so you start talking to each other intentionally, weekly, regularly, and power is created. It's created for both of you. It's awesome. It's fantastic. We're seeing it in people's lives, and it's so fulfilling.
And can I just say, when I see shared power, it really opens the door for a tremendous increase in love.
Yes, I believe that that's very true.
Yeah.
That love can only exist on shared power.
And maybe shared power is love.
As we draw this episode to an end, let's talk about how we can take what we've learned today and relate it to those 4 cornerstones of an intelligent marriage.
Great idea.
Namely, identity, intentionality, insight, and intimacy. So with identity, we have learned the natural identity of a man, masculine power, a woman, feminine power, and the differences. And to know that for ourselves and to remind ourselves, if we know who we are by our identity as a man or a woman and some of those natural powers that are within us, we know that's a great starting point. Mm-hmm. And then intentionality. Schedule some time with yourself daily to remind yourself of the power you do have within yourself and in your marriage. Schedule time with your spouse to discuss this in a way that allows for a give and take, where there's open communication.
Yeah.
Insight. Seek for new perspectives on how you or your spouse may or may not be seeing the power that they have. Look and see if they're recognizing that power and how they use it. Both understanding that true power is created and shared, not taken. And the more perspective you can find with this, with your spouse, that's going to give you better insight. Lastly, intimacy. Safety and security and learning this new language that you're learning together. It allows both of you to define your boundaries. And it creates a powerful trust between both spouses to feel confident, to explore new and deep, meaningful connections with each other. And remember, the intelligent spouse knows that to change from a stinky to a scintillating marriage first requires a change in themselves.
Thank you so much all for tuning into Marriage IQ. We hope today's episode has sparked some thoughts and brought you some valuable insights. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time on another exciting episode of
Marriage IQ.